everybody. Welcome to Project HR, a podcast dedicated to building better workplaces. I'm your host, Beth Pilgreen, and today we'll be talking about an event that recently took place in Las Vegas, the Fall 2019 CUE Conference. CUE, that's C-U-E, is a nonprofit member-run organization dedicated to assisting companies in the creation and maintenance of positive working environments. CUE conducts 2 national conferences each year, one in the spring and one in the fall at various locations throughout the country. These conferences feature a variety of speakers and discussion leaders and focus on both labor relations and positive employee relations. CUE's members and conference attendees represent virtually every industry and companies ranging from small businesses to large Fortune 100 companies. This community is led by none other than Michael VanDervort, CUE's executive director, and we are so lucky to have him as our guest today. Hello, Michael.
Hi, how are you today? I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me on.
I'm so glad that you're here. Now, guys, you're going to notice that Michael's voice may sound a little familiar to you. And if so, it's not just you. In addition to his work with CUE, he's also one of the hosts of the long-running Drive-Thru HR program on Blog Talk Radio. And at the time of this recording, Drive-Thru HR has almost 1,400 episodes. Michael, you've been on the air with Drive-Thru HR for almost 10 years. Is that right?
Yeah, I came on probably 7 years in. It was originally started by a friend of mine who did it for 2 or 3 years and then gave it up. And so there have been a series of hosts. So Drive-Thru has been sort of a shared podcast, which is an interesting kind of experiment because you get different backgrounds and you get different guests, and different voices. But it's been a long run, and we're one of I don't know that there's like a Nielsen ratings for HR podcasts out there, but we definitely are one of the longest running. And actually, we're up to almost 1,450 podcasts.
Wow.
Most of them live, most of them done, on a daily basis. So it's a labor of love. And I think it's really added some value over the years to the HR profession. So I'm proud to be part of it.
I don't doubt it. That's really cool. And also, that's really neat that it's live, too. That's a different and special skill in and of itself, that you're just having a live conversation. No edits here.
That's exactly right. The perils of live recording, but it's fun.
It keeps things interesting, that's for sure. Well, speaking as the host of a podcast that, as of this recording, has exactly 3 episodes in the can, you are the 4th, Michael. I appreciate you taking the time to join us on Project HR. So welcome.
Thanks. Like I said, glad to be here and looking forward to having the conversation.
Well, me too. I'd love to dive right into talking about the CUE conference. I know that just ended, right?
Our dates were October 13th to the 15th.
Wow. Do you feel like you have fully recovered yet, or are you still resting from that?
To be honest, if your primary experience going to conferences is as an attendee, you know that you have very busy and full days.
Mm-hmm.
People have sessions, you want to network. There's usually some kind of entertainment after in the evening. So it's a full day for the attendees. But for the people, the staff that are running the program, typically we have 3 people, including myself, that really run the program. And then we use volunteers from CUE membership and our board of directors and other sources. But there are 3 people full time, and we're working basically during the conference 5 15-hour days in a row to make get things set up and put the show on and make sure everything looks seamless, right? So there's a lot going on behind the scenes that you don't see at a conference, and it's pretty exhausting because there's always something that you have to have your eye on.
Yeah.
So I'm recovered, and ironically, like, we do a conference basically twice a year, once in the spring and once in the fall, and we actually start the planning for our next conference on the last day of our next conference is in New Orleans in May of 2020.
I saw that,
and we actually started planning for that conference on the last day of the New Orleans event. We have a lunch for our conference committee, so we are constantly in a planning cycle. So you never really what I do is I take a few days off after our conference because you just want to physically recover and sleep, right?
Yeah.
I bounce back pretty quickly there, but the catch to that is almost immediately for us, we have to pivot, and start planning the next conference. And we've already had the lunch plus 2 planning calls with our conference committee
Wow.
to get started for New Orleans in May. So it's a never ending grind. I don't mean to sound like I'm complaining.
Oh, you don't at all.
That's just the way it works.
Yeah, and I was sharing this with you earlier before we started the call. I am very familiar with conference world and how, I mean, you tirelessly work. The week of that conference, I don't know how anyone sleeps. Those that are putting on the conference,
Yep.
it is around the clock. So I have much compassion for you and I do understand. And thank God for those volunteers, right?
Absolutely. We could not put on
No
the
way.
conference without the volunteers that help us do the planning,
Mhm.
and then the people who volunteer to introduce speakers or help us at the registration desk, or any number of myriad tasks that need to be handled that the three of us just couldn't get done. Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank God you're right.
Yeah, they are wonderful. Well, how was the conference for you? Were you happy with how everything turned out?
I was. The conference itself, the flow, the program, I thought we had a good agenda, but it turned out to be, I heard a lot of people anecdotally, and we're still running our post-conference surveys, but I've seen some of the comments there, and people really thought that the conference was good. We leaned into some new topics. We had a few different, they're not edgy risks, but we took a few risks with things that we were talking about, and it was well received. So
Oh,
yeah, I was
good.
very happy with the conference. I was very happy with the turnout. We'll make some money, which is always a nice
Yes.
byproduct since that's one of our primary revenue streams. So yeah, all good.
That is wonderful. And you are so fortunate. And I'm glad that you had good feedback too with some of the risks that you took. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I'd love to give our listeners a little background on the event. How many years has Q been offering these conferences?
Q has been around in a couple of different forms since 1977. So we're going on our,
Oh, wow.
I think we're going into our 43rd year. We celebrated our 40th anniversary in Newport Beach, California in the spring of 2017 at a conference we ran there. When Q was first formed, it was a committee under another association, which is a large, well-known association called the National Association of Manufacturers. And
Mhm.
from 1977 until I think it was 1995, they operated as a committee that was sponsored and financially supported by NAM, is how they refer to themselves. And in 1995, Q split off. NAM and Q had a sort of an amicable split, and some people who had been involved with Q under the NAM umbrella took the organization out on its own. We were established as a nonprofit organization with our own charter in 1995, and we've been running that way ever since. So we're like 22 years as a standalone organization.
Wow.
During that time, when it first started out, the committee itself was the membership. Like, they didn't run a conference per se. They just had their meetings, which were set up as like a 1 day or a day and a half kind of committee session where different topics would be discussed and covered. So they would do that a couple times a year as part of their charter under NAM. I don't know exactly where, at what point it transformed from a committee members only kind of event into where they opened it up for public attendance so that even if you weren't a committee member or a NAM member, you could attend. But at some point they evolved to where it became a more of a full blown conference. But we're north of 85 conferences in the history of our organization over a 42-year period.
Wow.
It's a pretty robust conference agenda, and we cover a very narrow topic, in the HR field. So our conferences are very specialized, and the people that attend them are probably a little different from what you would see at a SHRM
Yeah.
event because of the nature of our topic.
And you also you have these 2-day conferences twice a year, but don't you also have regional conferences?
Yeah, we refer to them as regional meetings or consortiums.
Okay.
I think we try to differentiate them a little bit from a conference. Let me step back. Q's membership is largely North American centric.
Okay.
Most of our conference attendees come from North America or Canada. We've, from time to time, had people come from Europe. We've had people come from Asia in the past, South America, Mexico and whatnot. But we're not really a global conference, if you will,
Mhm.
because we tend to cover stuff related to the U.S. National Labor Relations Board materials, labor law, that kind of thing. Same thing with Canada. We don't have the staff or experience to kind of do Europe or the
Got it.
EU
Yeah.
or Asia, right?
Mhm.
So the conferences that we run in the spring and the fall are intended, and frankly, that the agenda is designed to kind of consider what's going on a national scope, right? We're going to talk a lot about the National Labor Relations Act. We're going to talk about a lot about what the Senate and the House and the White House are doing, so on and so forth. Same thing in Canada, what's happening on a provincial basis or a Canadian federal government basis.
Right.
At what we call a regional meeting, we take that down a notch. And so like some of the places that we do regional meetings, we tend to do one a year in several different cities, and there's kind of a fixed rotation. And then we do others on an ad hoc basis if someone has interest or if there's a developing issue at the local level. But what we do is we run them in Dallas, Atlanta, Philadelphia, Toronto. We typically go to Florida as well. So I guess what I'm trying to say is overall, for our national conferences, the focus is what's going on all across the US and Canada. At these regional meetings, which are not really conferences, they're more like a 4 to 6 hour event, we
Hmm.
focus on what's happening in the region where the conference is located.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
These regional meetings are great opportunities for local people who can't get to the national conference to kind of come in. Because what we do is we build the content for the regional meetings pretty much with the same format and emphasis that we have for the national meetings, which is built around networking and educational opportunities. But the focus is on more local or regional
Hmm.
activity than on national activity.
Hmm.
So it's a little bit of a difference, and we hope it gives our members an opportunity to expose some people in their HR function that might not be able to get to a Q conference, to a Q event, and to some of the learning that Q brings to our members.
That's great. I'm glad that you're able to do that at a regional level and focus on the community and the larger community with the surrounding states. That's great. Going back to the 2-day conferences, how would you say that these conferences have changed over time?
When I moved into the Q leadership, we started doing a bit more from a technology point of view at the conference, in that we just tried to up our game on audiovisual production standards. I brought in an event planner that not only helps us professionally plan the events up front, but she's there to help us run the production of the show. So we did a lot kind of behind the scenes, if you will, to
Hmm.
make the event more seamless and enjoyable. On top of that, we've tried new things from a speaker point of view. Like at our last conference, we had the CEO of a company called Translator. Her name is Natalie Egan.
Hmm.
She's a transgendered female CEO
Oh,
who came
wow.
in to tell her story.
Awesome.
It's not something that is necessarily all about labor and employee relations.
Well, it's culturally relevant, very much so right now.
We've really tried to add a focus on some different kind of topics, not to just keep going back to old standbys, try to challenge ourselves to be a little riskier in terms of what we present in terms of content. And then the other thing we've done is we've flexed the schedule, and now we're I think we found a happy medium. We've run the same sort of schedule the last 3 times, and it seems to have struck the right balance between learning and networking. But we've played with those things. We've also tried and experimented with things like, networking lounges and other things that are, maybe they didn't used to do with Cuba that are more prevalent at other kinds of conferences. And then the last thing, which I'm kind of proud of, is we used to publish a book, a massive conference book that had every slide from every slide deck in it, and it was an 8.5 by 11 spiral bound book that often approached or exceeded 400 pages. Right.
Wow.
2 years ago, we abolished that book and we've replaced it with an ebook and an app. And the app at this last conference had over 70% adoption, and nobody was complaining about the book.
So many people are moving and have been solely digital for years anyway. And so,
Right. And that was another thing that we were a bit behind the curve on, right? And
yeah,
we're now caught up. I just want to mention one more thing.
of course.
One of the things we implemented at Q is a practice of we always choose a charity. So, and we make a gift, it's a small gift, so it's not, changing the world, but we make a donation on behalf of all of our speakers. And then we just give them cards and we mention the charity. And, we try to give back, at least a little bit to the local community as, at least through a donation, if not through, something more. So
That's great, though.
I'm kind of proud of that idea. So.
Yeah, that's phenomenal because you're using your platform to give back to the community and letting the attendees and the speakers know, hey, because of your contribution, we're able to do this. But
Exactly.
also serving your conviction to tell all of your attendees as much information as possible. I mean, that's really incredible. You guys also offer quite a wide range of topics with your panels and your sessions. I'm curious to know, how do you and your team decide what topics to include in the schedule?
So it's an elaborate process. I have a list right now. I mentioned at the onset that we've had a couple calls.
Yeah.
We have a luncheon for our program committee on Tuesday at the conference. And so we start there. And typically at that luncheon, we typically talk about what have you liked at this event so far? How does it feel? What's worked, what hasn't worked. It's not really a recap because the event isn't over, but we take their temperature about what they're experiencing in real time, right?
Sure.
And then we talk about, okay, when we start planning for New Orleans, we're going to probably do that starting in November. So be looking for phone calls. So that really is just to get, everybody grounded and set for starting the next one. While that's going on, I get suggestions handed to me by people come up and say, I just saw this session about joint employer, and maybe next time you could offer something on this, and they may say, I don't know, card signing.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you took suggestions from members.
It's almost all suggestions, to be honest, but they come from all over the place. So we have a spreadsheet right now that has about 93 different topics on it, and some of them are very well defined. Like I want to see a speech or I want to see a presentation on employee relations from General Electric. I mean, that's not a real thing, but I mean, it's that specific, right? So,
Yeah.
so if we're going to do that, we have to go check with General Electric and see if they're willing, right? Others are just like leadership. That's it. That we get a word. We need more leadership.
Oh,
So it's a very broad, long laundry list.
sounds like it.
And we use our conference committee, which is about, right now, I think about 40 people are on that. Plus we have 2 co-chairs, and we spend weeks weaning through those topics, looking at, first thing we do is we come up with a theme. So like our theme for Las Vegas for the conference that just ended was how not to, in all caps, how not to gamble with your positive employee relations. So, and so a lot of the stuff that we did, I mean, not every topic necessarily fits exactly under that broad theme, but the idea is to present an agenda, somewhat in alignment with that helps people, feel like they're doing things to kind of maintain the status quo or get better.
Yeah.
In their current programs. We also look for a link, gambling, right? Las Vegas. And for
Right.
New Orleans, it's easy ways to jazz up your positive employee relations.
Oh, I love that. That's perfect.
Yeah. So, and I don't know if we'll have, 20 easy ways or not, but, that's kind of the aspirational goal, right? And so for me, easy ways mean, simple, straightforward, hands-on, and then jazz up, I guess, is, learning, building, making things better. If at least that's how I interpret it in my own head when I hear that theme. So we'll try to build an agenda that sort of reflects that, right? And then the other thing is, going into 2020, it's an election year, and there's going to be a lot of policy stuff coming out of DC, a lot of stuff about whoever I mean, obviously President Trump's going to be the Republican candidate, but whoever the Democratic candidate is, I mean, it would make a big difference if it was Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders versus, say, Cory Booker. I mean, I don't know how much difference, but Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders are much more aligned and lean to the left for labor relations issues or issues related to what unions want than some of the other like Joe Biden. Joe Biden would be a little bit less threatening to business, if you will. But we'll cover that kind of. So it's a puzzle, and you try to fit those pieces together. And of course, if you have a theme that you really want to cover. Like one of the things that's on the list is artificial intelligence, and you could talk about a million different angles, but first you have to have somebody that's expert enough to talk about it, right? So right now that's one of the things that are on our list, and our job then is, okay, if we want to cover that, who does it? Can we go find somebody? Who do we know? And so we use the committee to build out those agendas in that way. That's what they signed up to do when they volunteer to be on the conference committee, is to give us guidance on what we should talk about and help us find speakers and identify the right topics to cover.
That kind of goes into my next question. I was going to ask you, once you get your topics down and then your committee, you all talk about it, how do you find so many quality contributors to join and speak? Because you guys do have quite the who's who of speakers at this conference in regards to employee relations.
Yeah. So we're lucky in that one of the, I've mentioned the core DNA of Q several times. And one of the things that members are very generous about doing is sharing their best practices and their experiences and their ideas. Hopefully, one of the reasons you have joined is because you want to network and share ideas and information and practices about how to do things, and most especially how to do things better, right? So that's one of the reasons that most of our members are in the organization. So it's kind of incumbent upon them to present from time to time. And sometimes we have to ask people to volunteer, but a lot of times people stand up and say, hey, I've got this really great program that I'd love to share. I think we're really proud of it. So we get some speakers that way. We have 2 committees. One is a labor lawyers advisory committee, and the other is a Q consultants advisory committee. And
Mhm.
Walter Orqua, who owns Projections, that's running this podcast,
Yeah.
is currently he'll be rolling off at the end of the year. But for the last 2 years, Walter has been on our board of directors as the chair of the CCAC. And then we have a similar member on our board from the Labor Lawyers Advisory Committee. And the labor lawyers and consultants are all individual members, which other members of Q are companies. So 95% of our members are
Okay.
actually employers. And then we have about 35 people that are individuals that practice labor law or work in the consultant part of labor relations, if you will. And they have signed up and made a commitment to be part of Q and to be subject matter experts and provide advice and guidance to us. So those, we have a lot of those attorneys and we have a lot of those consultants, not only on our program committee, but also saying, hey, Mike, like somebody yesterday just told me joint employer is going to be big next year. And I'm like, we just did that like the last 3 conferences. And he's like,
Mm.
yeah, but it's still, and today as I was organizing some stuff because I have a Friday newsletter and I found like 5 stories about different things related to joint employer that are like, oh man, he's right. That's still very,
Wow.
very active, And so we count on them to give us that. We listen and we talk and we go back and forth, and we wean 93 topics down to 20 or 17. Sometimes we combine them, but it's a process and it takes a couple of months to get it done and then a while longer to find the right speakers. And through that, I'm fortunate. I have a very broad HR network. I tap that a lot. People in our organization have, other members similarly do that and so on. So it's a collaborative process that leads us hopefully to, what's most current and relevant every 6 months or so.
Yeah, you're very fortunate to have such a good mix of people on your committee as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. And just a reminder, you're listening to the Project HR podcast. I'm your host, Beth Pilgreen, and our guest today is Michael VanDervort, Executive Director of Q Inc. And Michael, is it true that HR professionals can also earn HRCI and SHRM certification credits for attending Q?
Yes, HR professionals can earn HRCI and SHRM credits when they attend the conference. We're an approved provider of SHRM credits, which means that we get to issue credits for all of our different events. And we
That's
do
great.
sometimes do a post-conference workshop. So it's not only the conference, but if people stay over and do the post-conference workshop, they can get SHRM credits. We do have conference credits available under HRCI, but post-conference workshop credits aren't available because they don't allow us to apply for those and get them approved. And so
Oh, got
it's
it.
HRCI is slightly more limited, but both are
Okay.
available if you're a certified HR professional.
That's great. And earlier, you had talked about how you guys almost immediately started planning for spring 2020 in New Orleans. So, can you give us a little preview of what we could expect, or are you guys still ironing out which topics are?
Yeah, we're actually in the process of trying to identify the keynote speakers.
Oh, wow.
The theme was the first big decision that we made. We're right now, we have a list of about 10 potential keynote speakers. And I've been doing this week, I've largely spent my time calling people and talking to them about their presentations, their pricing, that kind of stuff. And hopefully in the next 10 days or so, we will have our keynote speaker or speakers. I'm not sure if we'll have one or two. We vary the routine sometimes.
Mhm.
We'll have that identified. We will be opening our registration for New Orleans on December the 16th. We run an early bird special.
Ooh.
And I don't have the pricing for next year at my fingertips, but the early bird typically saves about $75 off the member price. And we offer a limited number of those registrations or event tickets, if you will, at that they're limited to 100. But registration for that opens December 16th and will run through the end of January or until the 100 early bird slots are filled. If anybody that is interested in attending New Orleans listens to this, I would encourage you to, especially if you have a team, people that might come to New Orleans, the early bird is the only way you can get a group discount. And that's by if you have 10 people
Oh.
coming, buy 10 tickets, save $75, it's $750 savings for your team. We used to offer a group discount, but it's very difficult because of the way companies do accounting. Everybody has their own business, travel card now, and keeping track of which company has registered 5 or more people when they're all doing individual registrations was extremely burdensome on us from the administrative side. And so we got rid of the group discount and replaced it with this early bird. So if you want to get the best pricing, jump on the website and register December 16th. So that's a pitch.
Mhm.
But the other side of that is our current planning process Once we get the keynotes, identified, and we also break up into subcommittees. So right now we're doing subcommittee calls related to the actual subject matter for the concurrent and general sessions. So hopefully by December 16th, we probably won't have all of our speakers identified, but by December 16th, if our planning process is successful, even with Thanksgiving kind of being built into the middle of it, when we open registration on the 16th, we will have our keynotes identified, and we should be able to provide a pretty solid list of topics so that people will know what they're, signing up for.
Well, that would be a great way to spend Q4 if you can't find a way, and also a good Christmas present to
Right.
themselves. Yeah.
If you have a labor relations professional at home that you love and you happen to be a random spouse or partner looking for a unique gift, buy a Q early bird on December 16th.
Yeah, I love it. Well, that's wonderful. If somebody that is listening is interested in attending that Q conference or a regional conference, which I'm sure that they are, how would they do that and where should they go?
We have social media platforms. We have a private group for our members and stuff. But the easiest way to find out anything that's going on at Q is to go to our public facing website. The URL is QInc, which is spelled CUEINC.com. And on that website, you will find there is a blog where we regularly publish content relevant to leadership, labor and employee, positive employee relations, labor relations. Our Twitter feed is there, which is very robust if you're looking for information related to labor and employee relations. Also, there's an events page, and there's a calendar at the bottom, which will show you conferences and regional meetings. Once the conference registration is live, we always have a dedicated landing page for the conference, which you can likewise access through that QInc.com events tab. QInc.com is kind of your home for your gateway to everything Q. If you're having issues and you can't find it on the website, you can always email me and my assistant Morgan by using the email director@QInc.com, and we'll respond to any questions you might have.
Well, that's wonderful. There are plenty of options for getting in touch with you guys regarding conferences next year and information surrounding HR. And it sounds like Q Conference this year was a great success, and spring 2020 sounds like it will be even better. So thanks so much for giving us this peek behind the curtain as to how you make Q conferences happen.
Sure.
But Michael, before you go, it's time for our lightning round questions. And these are the questions we always ask every guest of the podcast. And just know that the first question is always a little silly. Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, topic showdown. The fall 2019 Q conference took place in Las Vegas. And while, of course, you were there strictly for the conference, in your opinion, which classic Vegas performer rules the strip? Wayne Newton or Engelbert Humperdinck?
So before I answer that, I will tell you that I was in Vegas for 7 days, and I left the hotel twice, once to run down to Target to purchase gift cards in an Uber on Saturday morning, and once on Tuesday night to go out to dinner with a group of Q members.
That is unfortunate.
So I don't know. No. So I would say, to answer the question seriously, what I said what I think is it's Wayne Newton. I never really thought of Engelbert Humperdinck I never thought of him as Vegas, but anyway. But I would think now, Wayne's kind of in the past. So I think somebody like Celine Dion.
Celine Dion, that's what I would say.
I go Wayne based on your question, but Celine based on, what I think is actually happening today.
Ah, she's such an icon. I would pay so much money to see that woman. What's the worst job interview question you have ever been asked?
When I first was trying to break into HR, I was working as a letter carrier at the U.S. Postal Service. And while I was at the U.S. Postal Service, I was a member of a union and got elected as a union official.
Wow.
And so I was a union person trying to switch over professionally into the HR profession. And one gentleman looked at me and said something along the lines of, how can you possibly conceive of being an HR person when you're a union member? You obviously are on the side of the underdog. And I was like, first of all, I went, is that a question? And then second of all, I went, lots of union people become a HR, and there's tons of them. But anyway, this guy pretty much told me with that question that you're not getting the job that we're talking about, because he couldn't conceive of me being an HR person and couldn't understand how I could. So
joke's on him now.
I tried to answer it, but it just turned into I knew the interview was over at that point.
Yeah. A debate of sorts. Yeah. Well, what's your favorite thing about working in HR, Michael?
It's kind of a cliche because people say, why are you working in HR? I like people. Actually, it is the people, but the biggest thing about working with people is it gives you an infinite opportunity to be able to help resolve problems in a positive way, hopefully, or deal with solving unique, complex issues that may be challenging the workplace and trying to figure out how to manage through those with, by partnering with operational managers. So that little bit of strategy, I guess, and the puzzle of how people do stuff is what fascinates me and keeps bringing me back to HR.
That's great. What's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
So the best piece of advice, I guess, is this. The guy said, don't forget to make time to do things for yourself.
Oh, that's great.
I tend to do stuff for a lot of other people and put myself off to the side. And he said, only you are going to take care of you. So, make that a focus. And that's something I have to keep reminding myself of from time to time.
Me too. Yeah. Who or what inspires you these days?
As we approach 2020 and, with all the stuff that's going on, I don't get into politics, but with all the stuff that's going on and there's so much divisiveness in our country right now, I have friends I'd say on both sides of the equation, whether it's a red or a blue, whether they're from the red side or the blue side, if you want to position it that way,
right,
that are involved in the process, whether it's supporting a candidate or doing work to raise money or, support, protesting, whatever out in front of the White House. I mean, I don't necessarily see myself doing that, but I think the folks that are doing that right now are probably more committed to solving problems in that realm than I am. And I'd like to up my game as we go forward into 2020. So I think I don't have one person. I think it's a group of people who are concerned enough to try to make a difference. And I think politics is, very touchy right now. So that's something that I want to try to figure out.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining me today, Michael, on this week's episode of Project HR. And thanks to our listeners, of course. Don't forget to grab the companion for this episode at projectionsinc.com/podcast. In it, you'll find links, resources, notes, and more. Also, if you'd like to be on Project HR or know somebody who might, feel free to email us at projecthr@projectionsinc.com. Thanks to our new subscribers and to everyone who's been listening. We love getting your feedback, so thank you. Don't forget to rate us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you get your content. That's it for me for now. Let's make it a great day at work.